pouring with purpose, be within and without bars. So just a quick introduction of these two folks. I will start with Ivy Mix. She is an award-winning bartender. Actually, she won American Bartender of the Year at Tales of the Cocktail in 2015. She is also the co-founder of Speed Rack, which I'm sure you've all heard of, and a co-owner and partner and working bartender at Leyenda in Brooklyn, New York. And we also have the famous Jacob Briars, who I'm told was once the best bartender in New Zealand. Is that correct? Yeah.
It's a very short list.
It's a short.
And it was a very long time ago.
He only creates blue drinks, I've heard. But he's in his spare time, he's also the director of education and advocacy for Bacardi, the world's largest family-owned spirits company. And he leads a team of over 150 ambassadors around the world, providing guidance, leadership, and just general smiles and wonderful energy. So we're really happy to have them both here. And he's also an award-winning presenter as well. So we've got two award-winning people up on stage for you right now. So they'll be taking questions. So please welcome to the stage Jacob Briars and Ivy Mix.
Hello.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and also thank you to the wonderful Miss Frankie Marshall for that wonderful introduction. One of the best things you can ever do if you're a presenter and you're in a foreign country is try to get yourself the most glowing introduction you possibly can. So I wrote one for Ivy, and Ivy, I think, was going to do a slightly less glowing one for me. But we don't really need to do it anymore because Frankie's done it for both of us. Okay, well, welcome along, and thank you. I know this is a very busy time of year, and there's so much activity on, so thank you for devoting a little bit of your afternoon to pouring with purpose. We got some, maybe we don't have slides. Okay, well, in that case,
don't we?
We will ad lib. All right, so a little bit. Oh, there we go. All right. So, Ivy, you've been introduced so wonderfully. This is a really rare opportunity to hear from somebody who I think has done more than just about anybody else over the last couple of years to shape the way the industry is moving in the United States and the industry is moving even globally. So maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, so I won't kind of go on at too much length about who I am, but as Frankie said, I'm a working bartender. I'm a bar owner of my bar Leyenda in Brooklyn, New York. I have dedicated a lot of my career to trying to do more with the platform I've been given, either behind the bar or on a stage, trying to do good either for women in the industry with the competition I co-founded with my business partner, Lynette Marrero, called Speed Rack, or any other slew of things that we'll get into later today. But yeah, I'm here because Jacob asked me to be here for this, and I am very passionate about this stuff. Like people like Bobby Hugelhorst sitting right there also have to give you a shout out. He's awesome.
Great.
So is everyone else, but he does got great stuff too.
Cool. And then once you get to a certain age in this industry, you have to move from full color portraits like Ivy gets to black and white. To give you a bit of my background, in my very distant past, I've been a bartender, a bar owner. What's that? Oh. And now, as Frankie said, I work with Bacardi, which is one of the largest drinks companies in the world, working on our team of brand ambassadors. But more than that, I've been sort of very much interested in the intersection between politics, community, and causes for more than 20 to 25 years. And so the way in which we can take some of those trends which are starting to bubble up in this industry and the intersection between what brands can do, what bars can do, and what bartenders can do to try and make the world a better place is an extremely interesting one for me. All right. If you were a bartender many years ago, you were taught one thing very simply. Behind the bar, you never talk about politics. Never bring politics into a bar, never bring religion into a bar. In fact, try to have no opinions whatsoever on anything except maybe sport. And even then, that's a little controversial. So particularly in sort of hotel bars, restaurant bars, it was like basically be a kind of blank slate so that when people come into the bar, there's no opinions you hold. It's a safe space that you're creating for them. And I actually think that things have really started to change. But certainly for sort of 50 to 100 years in 20th century, bartending was very much, don't have controversial opinions. Make it a very, very safe and neutral space for everyone to come into. But over the last couple of years, that's really started to change, and it's being driven by the intersection of, I guess, two big trends. I guess bartenders, right, of a certain age, millennials, call them what you will, are much more motivated to make a change in the world that they see around them. And that's intersecting perfectly with a generation of consumers, if you like, try not to use that word, but a generation of people out there in the public who no longer want to be passive. They want to have opinions, and they expect you, whether you're a bar, a brand, a business, to have those opinions too. And I know that's certainly something you struggle with. And well, you're in a very unique bubble. Maybe tell us a little bit about Brooklyn.
Yeah, so I have kind of always towed this funny line of, I feel like if I have a platform to share my opinions, then I'm going to take that and try to make a difference. It's not necessarily the same opinions of many of my business partners. I own a bar in Brooklyn, as I said, called Leyenda, and we tend to be very politically active, especially I see a few Americans in the room. Yeah. No one's unaware that the political situation in the United States is fucked with a capital F, and I'm not afraid to get up there and say,
tell us how you really feel.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah. You can either say how you really feel, or you can kind of be like, I kind of want to do this thing, and that's what we're going to talk about today. There are two different ways of making a big impact, no matter what you believe. You can be really in your face, like I am. I use my social media platform to shout and scream and try to make an impact that way. We do fundraisers at the bar, and
this is every American bar right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Two people with completely opposite views kind of shouting at each other through the bartender. And I guess certain cities have, it's maybe a little bit easier to take a stand.
Yes, I mean, I live in Brooklyn, and Brooklyn is a bubble. And it's easier for me to do things at my bar that are of political agenda without probably offending a lot of people, because again, I live in a bubble.
But it's this idea that bars and bartenders shouldn't be kind of politically involved or involved in their community is very much a 20th century idea. So if you go back and you read your Jerry Thomas and your Harry Johnson and all the dead old white men of the industry, they very much talk about the role of the saloon keeper and the tavern keeper and the bartender as kind of the captain of their local community. As Brian Brown says in the extremely terrible movie Cocktail, the bartender was the aristocrat of the working class. And they were supposed to be somebody that was hyper engaged and could, in some instances, were so politically engaged in their community that they could actually deliver votes for political candidates, change the way in which certain things happened, even change the way that councils and governments spent their money. And then that all started to change. But what we're really starting to see is it's now starting to change back. And that bars and bartenders and consumers are all coming together to make sometimes very small but significant changes in the way we do business. Now, when you take a stand or you decide to take a cause, in some instances it can be extremely controversial. This is probably one extremely relevant from last month. It was very much a divisive, hot potato issue, if you like, that caused people to take a stand one way or the other. And in some instances it can be, extremely soft, like who wouldn't agree with this? Maybe our friends from Japan, perhaps. But most other bartenders would say, hey, this is definitely something we want to support. And what's really driving this is a kind of confluence of, we live in a world where capitalism, consumer capitalism, has effectively won. We can argue about the politics, the political model we're going to end up with, but the economic system that we have is kind of, that debate is over, if you like. So we have a generation of people coming of age now who've never known anything except the fact that where they spend their money can have they are politically active through the money they spend. And this is one of my favorite quotes from a food activist called Anne Lappé, who wrote Diet for a Hot Planet, which is about kind of climate change and the sorts of topics we try to avoid. But basically, every time that you spend money, you're casting a vote for the kind of world that you want to create. And I think that when our guests are coming into bars and restaurants now, or they're choosing to buy brands in stores, they're very much motivated by those sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like we're in this era of everyone wants to know who the distiller is. Everyone wants to know what kind of yeast you put in your fermentation. People want to know, where your beef comes from. There's all these different things. It's almost like a DIY farm-to-table thing, and that doesn't have to be necessarily just about the ingredients that we're consuming. It can also be about the ethics of the things that we consume.
And there's a kind of a sort of challenge there, which is that people now they've got this money to spend, and they're going to go into a bar or a restaurant over a particular day, and they are going to make a choice, either passively or actively, about how they want to spend their money, and that can present a challenge. Like if you see the argument of the Trump voter and the non-Trump voter arguing, you think, oh, well, this is particularly divisive. Is this something I want to get into? But for bars and restaurants and brands and bartenders even, this also presents an amazing opportunity, because people will make specific choices. If you put those choices in front of them, that's actually going to drive them to make particular choices about where they spend their money. And the upshot of this is hopefully that if you connect the brands that you're pouring, the bar, the philosophy of your bar, the bartenders that are working with something that's important to your guests, then all of those things can align, and you can do good as well as enjoying good business. So a couple of things just to give you some kind of facts behind this kind of macro trend. Millennials, again, a term that everyone, including millennials, hates to use. But doing good is good business, right? So millennials tell us, typically in surveys, they tell us two things. First, don't fucking call me a millennial. And then second, they say that they'd be 66% more likely to choose a cause-related purchase. Right, so whether that's a pair of jeans or a bottle of spirits or a particular cocktail, if it's dovetailing with a cause that's important to them, then then they will choose to spend their money there.
I think if you look at the popularity of brands like Warby Parker or Tom's or things like this, you really see that people these things became fashionable because, and they have a really clear brand, but it's clear that you're standing for something in the purchases that you make, and in that mark, you're making an impact just by showing like a t-shirt that says Tom's. People are like, oh, I see that you made a purchase conscientiously. And the same benefits can happen inside the bar as well.
Yep. My jeans are supposed to aid the cause of gun control, apparently. But I don't know how much they're actually doing for it. But $5 went to gun safety causes.
But there's a certain passive patting on the back that makes us all feel a little bit good about ourselves when we make these purchases. And it is, we're going to get into this as well, but a passivity that can be also a benefit in what we're doing.
But I mean, I guess if you're a bar owner or a bartender or even a brand, there's the prize, if you like, when you can put these two things together is actually quite large. So people tell us, and again, remember, there's a little bit like, who wouldn't vote for more money for animal welfare, or who wouldn't vote for more healthcare? You have to take this with a little bit of a pinch of salt. People often tell you the best version of themselves, but people typically say that they would spend about 25 to 40% more than they were already going to spend if they felt that it connected in some way to a cause, to a purpose, to a positive reason. And I guess this is what you were touching on, Ivy. There's a kind of gap between the two things. Some people just are passive and some are active.
Yeah.
So what do we mean by passive? Well, that's the guests that you already have, and they've made no conscious decision to come into your bar or to do anything, right? You're effectively saying, you're here already, let's take some of the money that we were going to spend and devote it to some kind of cause. This really requires no active step on the behalf of your guests. So you see this in places like San Francisco. I know it's very famous for this. You get your check when you go into a restaurant in San Francisco, and it turns out to be about 15% higher than you thought it was, because there's a whole series of surcharges that they've put on that fund different things. You're already there, you've already eaten, you've already drunk your cocktail, so it requires no particular choice on your behalf. Likewise, all proceeds go to. But what's more interesting is how you can get people to make active choices for this. You can get somebody to consciously choose, I'd like to drink this brand, I'd like to drink this cocktail, I'd like to support this bartender, or even better, I'd like to come in on a night where I wouldn't otherwise have visited your bar because there's some kind of cause that I'd like to support. I don't
exactly, yeah. So I think, my personal opinion, I am not that pro-passive. Nope, no. I'm more of an active person. I think that activism deserves to be active, and sometimes when I get a check and it's like, oh, 3% of this went to go pay our health care to our employees, which is what happens in San Francisco. I'm like, well, by law, you have to pay them health insurance, so why am I, you should just be figuring that out in your pricing. But that being said, I think there are options for going out and doing active stuff within your bars. At Leyenda, we have pretty much, it's not like every Tuesday of the month we're having a charity event, but we do about 1 to 2 charitable activities every month, ranging from all sorts of different things. And again, this is only talking about bars themselves, not necessarily brands or events, but we'll do things like, hey, Bacardi, do you want to come and sponsor our night? We're going to do this event X. And with their help, we're able to make a new cocktail menu featuring their brand and then donate $1, $2, half the price of the cocktail throughout the whole night to charity. And the really amazing thing is that every night we do this, we do it on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Sunday night, we increase our sales at the bar by 25 to 40%. So people who, because you can't really send out, we were talking earlier, you can't really send out an email to someone and be like, it's Tuesday and we're still open, you know, like we're still here, still making drinks, and it's Tuesday. I know you probably don't really want to drink, but maybe you can make an effort. But if we're like, hey, it's Tuesday and we're raising money for dolphins or immigration reform or something like this, we tend to get people out. It's an excuse to go out, and you could be drinking anywhere, but if you drink somewhere and that money is going to a good cause, people come in, and 9 times out of 10, they're the best type of customers you could want to have because they care.
And people will be, you know, they see this, you know, they're going out to spend money already, and to spend money on cocktails is, by the standards of human history and indeed the standards of the global population today, a kind of luxury choice. And so you're enabling people to feel much better about that choice, that they chose to spend their money in that way, and you're able to enable them to feel much better about the fact that they spent it with you. And you put those two things together and it can be extremely powerful. It's also an amazing opportunity for brands who 20 years ago never tried to do these things, with a couple of exceptions which we'll get into. But generally speaking, you know, once upon a time a brand was trying to be literally, in many instances, as vanilla as possible. You know, offend as few people as possible, and that way you would increase the same kind of remit. And to borrow your example from, you know, you can't really send out an email saying, you know, hey, it's Tuesday, come and drink with us, with no real reason. But there's an amazing opportunity likewise for brands now. We, you know, on the brand side, we can't send out an email saying, hey, it's the 27th of October. We haven't hit our number for our brand by the end of the month. We've got 4 more days. Could you come and help? But we can say, hey, let's support this kind of charity. You know, we think this is important. So you can put brands, great business for the bars, great custom for bartenders, and you're giving the guests, the consumers, exactly what they actually want, which is to feel much better about the fact that they went out on a Tuesday and chose to spend time and money with you. So on the brand side, this is probably the most controversial because, again, as we talked about, you know, until a few years ago, the job of, you know, brands were run by marketing teams whose job was stay out of the news. Whatever you do, like, don't take an opinion, don't take a stand on anything. Even we use the Nike example, right? So they have Colin Kaepernick this year, but 30 years ago when they had Michael Jordan, who was probably a much bigger star, you know, he was famous for saying, like, Republicans buy sneakers too. So Nike's job was, you know, let's offend nobody. We'll just try and, you know, go down as close down the middle of the road as we possibly can, and you know, and then we'll grow through that. And
do you
that's
guys
really
all know? I know that you know, I don't follow football at all, but I know about the Colin Kaepernick. Does everyone know about the drama that happened with Nike and Colin Kaepernick?
Yeah, but they don't call it football here.
Football.
Yeah.
Sorry, American football. So I'll just give a look. Basically, he took a knee during the national anthem to try to protest the respect for Black people and Black Lives Matter, and then he was chastised for it, and then he was suspended, and now no one will re-sign him, essentially because he's sticking up for his race and for people everywhere. So the fact that Nike took this stand, signed him, and that ad, which we can go back to later, but it was a really big stance on Nike's part. That was a huge gamble, but it really ended up working arguably in their favor. It's been very... It's kind of the thing, like, no press is bad press. There's certainly people who are, like, cutting up their Nike shoes and doing whatever, but it's really an amazing stance to take, and I think that we as individuals and as brands and as bars have the same opportunity.
Yeah, so I think for, you know, certainly for alcohol brands, they're probably moving much less aggressively into this space than something like Nike. I think Nike's got a lot of confidence built up over 30 years or so. And, you know, you definitely don't want people setting spirits on fire, both for them and for us. But you can certainly see some brands sort of starting to gingerly move into this space. And there's an opportunity for many brands, particularly because of their global reach, to have an even bigger impact than you might otherwise do. This is one, you know, trying to solve one very, very small but extremely global problem. This is a campaign which is run by Bacardi, who obviously I work for, which is called The Future Doesn't Suck. And the aim is to remove all single-use plastic straws from as many bars as possible. And that seems like, okay, well, that's like 0.5% of all the plastic in the ocean. Kind of what's the point? What's the aim here? And the idea is, well, there's a direct connection, obviously. We could go out and campaign for, let's remove all the plastic fishing nets. But that doesn't always work because that's a bit of a stretch for both a brand and a bar. Where these things become extremely powerful is where you've got an overlay between connection, what's the brand actually doing, or what's the bar doing? What community are you in? What community are you trying to serve? So plastic straws seems a pretty simple and obvious one. You use those to drink cocktails, often frozen, which are often made with rum, hopefully
and it's
Bacardi.
not too politically charged, right? Like,
yeah.
all you need to do is Google turtles and straws and see the image of the turtle with the straws in its nose, and anyone will be like, totally, I don't want a fucking straw. Like, no straw for me. But there are more aggressive examples of what you can do as a brand as well.
Another one which is sort of extremely safe, but it's also extremely worthy. When we say that it's safe, we're not diminishing the kind of impact or the efficacy of the campaign. It's just that they've chosen, as a large global brand to make something which will offend as few people as possible while also doing good. This is another very simple but very worthy example. Vodka is mostly made up of water. So if you're a vodka brand, what better charity than bringing clean drinking water to people in Latin America? So this is Absolute Elix's water truck. Again, really, really simple, clear, direct connection between a cause that they're trying to support. And if you're if you're a bar manager and you've got the choice of 4 or 5 vodkas or however many you stock, hopefully it's at least more than one, you've got the option, which brand should I choose? And you sit there and say, well, all other things being equal, I like the cause that this supports, so I'll support this one. Going from an extremely global cause to one that's hyper local, brands can also try to have a positive impact in the world in which they sort of in the locality in which they're moving, and we see this particularly with lots of rum, mezcal, tequila brands, etc. This is Santa Teresa, which is a rum from Venezuela, and they run a project called Project Alcatraz. And it's extremely unusual. When you hear the story, you think, okay, what does rugby have to do with rum? Very little. About 15 years ago, a couple of gang members broke into the Santa Teresa distillery because there's very little work in the region. It's low paid. It's easier and faster to kind of gain riches through signing up to the gangs. They held a security guard hostage. Eventually, the police caught them and decided they were going to put them in jail. The owner of the distillery made an intercession and said, I'll give you a quick option. You can either go to jail for what you've done, which will be a long time and extremely unpleasant, or you can turn up tomorrow and work in the distillery and make retribution for your crime. And 3 gang members went away and said, that's what we'll do. And the next morning, 27 people turned up, all looking for work and a sense of purpose. So they gave work to any gang member that wanted it, attached to a whole series of goals that they had to sort of show that they were turning their life around. And part of doing that was making them play rugby together to break down some of those old rivalries. So you can take a massive cause and you can take a very, very small cause and decide, and in fact you can often have a bigger impact the smaller it is. Or you can be extremely controversial, and this is one that I know that we both love.
Yeah. So I think that this is where you kind of get in this interesting zone, right? Is that when is branding and when is your fight, whether it be a good fight or a bad fight, is it good for you? Is it bad for you? I have a long history with Ilegal. I kind of helped start the brand way back in the day in Guatemala and obviously Oaxaca. But they really decided to make a huge statement. They did this whole guerrilla warfare thing where they would go and paster like New York City style posters on the thing, Donald eres un pendejo, which means Donald, you're an asshole. And then they would get these huge projection screens and just blast them on massive buildings. And it was a huge impact. And this was going on before the election when people were like, oh, there's no way. That's never going to happen. And then it did. And I remember calling up John Rexer, who owns the company, and being like, this is kind of good for you. Like, this election is kind of good for you. You've won all these awards on this campaign that you did because it's an advertising campaign, right? But it's also a political agenda. So it's definitely polarizing. And I have a little anecdote. We had this poster up at my bar after the election because Leyenda kind of became this kind of like a hub after the election. All these patrons would come in and be like, we have to do something, like let's just do some sort of event and we'll raise money. And I was like, yeah, I'm happy to do whatever you want here because as long as I believe in it personally, I think we can really make a change. however small. So we had this Donald Eres un pendejo poster on our bathroom door, and we have this great security footage thing. This guy's like sitting at the bar, and he's like looking at the door, and he's looking at the bar, and he's looking at the door, and like this. And then he picks out his phone, and he is Google translating what pendejo means. And then he like gets up, strolls over to the bar, rips the poster off of our bathroom door, crumples it in a ball, and throws it at my female bartender. And everyone was just, and walks out without paying, right? And it kind of was this, for me, I was like, what an asshole, we have to do something about this. And to my business partners, I was like, I'm gonna put that right back up. And my business partners were like, it's a really crazy political time right now. What if that guy had gotten more pissed off than this taking his poster and like crumpling it up and throwing at you? So that was a kind of an awakening moment to me that I have a bar, I have employees, I have my own political agenda, but maybe it's not, like I wasn't there when that happened. I saw the footage. So I think that there are ways that we can do things, and there's ways we can make an impact, but if you're ever putting someone else in danger, then perhaps there is a way to take a more, not necessarily passive, but a different stance on it. Because this is aggressive. Like walking around calling the president an asshole as a brand, I applaud it. I'm like, this is fantastic because I believe in it. But if I didn't, I would probably be really offended. Like if this were happening about Obama, I would be like, what? I would be really upset. So we got to toe the line, but I respect that people.
I think that there's a kind of safety there as well, because typically if you're in the United States and you speak Spanish, you're either a Hispanic immigrant or you're probably fairly open to Hispanic culture. So the people who couldn't understand that poster probably walked right by it and probably thought, wow, what an amazing portrait of our president. And then the people who could understand it were sort of secretly like laughing. But there's another overlay. We're going to talk a lot about how when a cause that's worthy overlays with what it is that the impact you're trying to have in the world and the community that you can influence, it can become really powerful. So, Mezcal and Ilegal is a brand from Mexico, and then there's a huge number of Mexican immigrants who work in the bars and restaurants, often behind the scenes, across the United States. So there was a really kind of powerful way that they were speaking to a very specific community, and it had a powerful impact for them. Yeah,
public recognition and support. I think that's the benefit of it. Like, no matter what your views are, to see something like, hey, we got you, and illegal, our whole thing is that nothing should be illegal besides illegal, is about illegal immigration, and I think it's a fantastic, even just visual support of a huge group of people.
But you can choose things which are much less controversial as well. So one of the most obvious things that we're seeing lots of brands do as well is, finding an even smaller community, which is just the bartenders from around the world. Well, this is actually a little more controversial than we expected. but this is Martini, which has created a cycling program with the aim of improving the health and wellness of bartenders across Europe. Or another great example, which is, and this is a slightly terrifying picture of Philip Duff, but Philip Duff has launched a Geneva brand, which has a very, very specific, extremely tight use case. So $1 from the sale of every single bottle of Geneva goes to support a charity called The Benevolent, which is a charity that looks after bartenders who have health and wellness problems, often retired bartenders. So it's a very, very specific way in which he's saying, my Geneva is speaking directly to bartenders, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is, quite literally, and that can be really powerful. All right, on to bars, and I know this is this is where it all comes together, where you've got the ability to curate the list of brands you want to stock to say one thing or another, but also where you can be bring bartenders and brands together in a single place to do great things.
Yeah, so I already gave Bobby a shout out, but I think that we frequently as bars, we have platforms that we can take, we can have steps that we do, and again, it can be like, this is this thing I believe in, or this is not, but at the end of the day, raising money is kind of how we do stuff for charity, right? You can go volunteer, you can do whatever, but at the end of the day, the dollar makes the difference. Okra is a bar that Bobby opened in Houston, Texas, that I think really is kind of a staple of what is possible for raising money. If you, those little ballot boxes there, basically what happens when you go in, you order a drink, the drinks are fantastic because it's Bobby, you can hang out there and it's really fun because it's one of Bobby's bars, but you get a token and you can go and put it in any of these ballot boxes for who you want to donate to, and at the end of the month, money is donated to these charities. And I think that it's it's just fun to do. Like going and being like, yeah, I got a little token, I'm gonna do this little thing. And B, it gives a sense of kind of, again, it's kind of like back-slapping pride to the patrons that go there. Houston is a massive city. It's an incredibly diverse city. It's one of my favorite cities, actually. But I think that this is an example of what people can do. It's hard. This is a not-for-profit, an actual not-for-profit.
Yeah, many bars are not-for-profit, but this is deliberately a not-for-profit.
Exactly, exactly. And bars suck to run. It's so hard, and these guys are doing it for a way. Again, what you said. They're purposefully not making any money for themselves. They run their bar, and everything that's run over, they donate to charity.
In the 6 years it's been open, it's raised over $1 million at most recent count. Bobby Hugel, by the way, who's another extraordinary figure in the U.S. industry, is here in the crowd. So thank you for all the work you do for the charities of Houston and further afield. And that's one very, very extreme example, like opening a bar from start to finish that is designed to be an engine to do good in the world, right? In that specific community, so they're not trying to kind of, solve world hunger. It's, very specific charities localized primarily to the city or to communities of interest that affect the people that are drinking there. And it also does something which I also think is great, particularly for Americans. It teaches you how to vote. You get monthly practice every time you come there. Another one, let's say you think to yourself, okay, well, I'm not really interested in dolphins and I'm not really interested in, bartender health and wellness or any of these things, but I want to have an impact in the world where I am. This is a really great example. This is the 212 Hospitality Group, which has done some of the most innovative bars in the last decade in downtown Los Angeles. Now, Los Angeles sounds probably to those, particularly if you don't live there, is a really evocative place, unbelievable wealth, sunshine, but downtown Los Angeles is the home of Skid Row. And it had an endemic homeless problem, and it still does. And so that's one of the things that was stopping people from coming into downtown Los Angeles, but it's also a horrible thing to see. There's very few things, probably of all the problems we have to solve in the world, homelessness is the one that's kind of the most dehumanizing for the people who are suffering from it. So every single one of SED's bars in the 212 Hospitality Group donate money to local homeless charities that work very specifically just in the neighborhoods where they've got bars open. And I think that has a powerful payoff because it helps to solve a problem that's stopping your guests from coming to your region. You're actually improving your neighborhood as well as doing good in the world. And I think that's very powerful. And then finally, this one here shows another great example about what you can do. And this is Elixir, which is a bar in San Francisco. And they do a charity takeover. So anyone on any night, but ideally they try to push you towards like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, can take the bar over and become a guest bartender for a night. So if you've ever had any of your guests who think to themselves, I think I could do that, or I used to do this at university, they give you the opportunity to effectively buy the bar out and support a charity cause of your own making. And this one I think is really powerful. Now, the way in which the money is raised, the drinks are sold and they go to Elixir. That's their typical business model. And then in the US, bartenders are paid through tips or gratuities. So you take all of the tips which people pay you on top of the cost of the drink, and that goes to your charity. But the typical amount raised is between $4,000 and $8,000 in a single night, which is not a bad haul for charity fundraising.
Yeah, and I also just kind of want to bring a bit of attention to the fact that especially the Elixir model, is a really good way to make money.
Yeah.
Like they're having someone buy out their bar, and I think that there is the real thing that I think people should recognize is that in charity work you can actually make money. You're not going to make a lot of money, but you can make some, and that's the thing. Like the fact that whenever we do a charity event at Leyenda, our sales are that much higher, I think really speaks to something. And not only that, but all the bars that we mentioned there are from the States. We have a really weird way of working in the States that we can't it's kind of weird working with brands. I'm sure you guys are aware of that. But in Europe, I think there's a real opportunity for people to partner with brands and be able to make a much bigger impact in what they're doing. So, yeah.
Yeah, hit up the brands.
The brands. That's the brands, yeah.
I mean, if any of you, and this is actually, this idea of a takeover or giving a night up from your normal business. If you're a bar operator, you think to yourself, man, I'd never want to do that, right? Margins are tight enough as it is. But if you think about like the way that something like this or non-profit nights or some kind of charity night on a night that's already slow gives you an opportunity to bring in new guests into your bar. So it's a recruitment tool, effectively. Brings new people in, gets them to spend more than they might otherwise have done.
Yeah, absolutely. We're doing this year for Christmas. So Land is a Latin spirits bar, and most people, Christmas almost all over the world is the most busy time for bars. Not that many people are like, margaritas, Christmas. So we have been slow during that time when we first opened. So last year we decided that we were going to do a Christmas pop-up. We called it Slayenda, which was like half Christmas, half like paying homage to Beyonce, basically. And then she wrote a cease and desist, and it had to be for all women who slay. But this year, we are going to do a Christmas pop-up again, and they're everywhere, especially in the States. I feel like everyone has their Christmas pop-up. But we're going to change it this year and try to have we're going to have ours, that $1 from every cocktail sold is going to go to women's charities, because there are lots of messed up stuff happening in this world right now against women. It always has happened, but people are becoming more aware of it. And we're going to use that platform for ourselves to try to raise some money. And the other thing is that my whole thing that we hired a PR lady to do the PR just for the event. And I was like, okay, we're a female-owned business, a female-owned bar, which is very rare. And you could go and drink at any Christmas pop-up and get the kitsch and get the cute cocktail vessel and like all your Instagram favorites anywhere. Or you could come to our bar, support a female-owned business, and just by the act of drinking in our bar, you are giving a woman a gift for Christmas, for the holidays, a gift of safety, a gift of whatever this is. So I'm really excited to see how it kind of turns out.
And Christmas, or whatever festival you may call it, I guess you have to call it Feliz Navidad, right? Exactly. As long as you don't have to play that. But like that is the time where, the challenges in particular communities are most commonly brought into focus, because it's, the most joyful time of the year, etc. Another great charity innovation is the 12, started in British pubs, the 12 pubs of Christmas, where you basically kind of get together with some groups in your bar, groups of bars in your community or area, and use those to jointly promote yourselves as a destination, particularly to push back against the idea that everybody heads into the downtown larger bars. Then those are kind of great innovations that again allow you to do good at that time. All right, on now to what can bartenders do specifically, and I think the answer is they can do an enormous amount. In fact, one of the most inspirational examples, you can often think to yourself, it's cool for the brands, Bacardi's got lots of money, you should be able to do lots of things. Ivy owns a bar, it's good for her, but I'm just a simple bartender, what can I possibly do? And the answer is, well, perhaps taken individually, not a lot. But when you pull your ideas and your mission and your cause together with other bartenders in your city, in your country, or around the world, the answer is you can do an enormous amount. Gary Regan, or Gaz Regan as he likes to be known now, did a massive call out, which was a real inspiration for me in terms of thinking about what we could actually do as an industry to improve the world. No matter, put lots of people's actions together and you can have a massive impact. He put out a request for what was called Just One Shift. And the idea was every bartender working in the world on a single day would offer up their tips or their gratuities, whatever it is that they made, and the funds would go to an amazing charity called Wine to Water, which is actually started by a bartender, and it takes money from the developed world and puts it into at-risk communities to provide clean water. And in a single night around the world, they raised $40,000. So it shows the power of kind of collective action. Even in a single instance, right here in Berlin, Damien Guchard, who was the Bacardi Legacy winner for Germany in the previous year at Mr. Susan, raised 4,000 euros to support. He took sale of every single drink, went to support hurricane victims in Puerto Rico. And then he actually took that $4,000 and matched it with his own time and effort and flew down to San Juan to work on some charity projects, gave up a week of his time, and had a much more rewarding visit to the Caribbean than if he'd been drinking frozen drinks and sitting in the beach, right? So even a single bartender with a single mission and a specific drink with a specific mission, you can raise much more money for worthy causes than you probably ever thought. Another great example, of course, is Negroni Week, which started in Portland, Oregon as a bartender-led charity to try and, kind of spark a little bit of inspiration around one of the bartenders' favorite cocktails. It's now become a massive global forum, and it has raised well over $1 million in the last 6 years. And then, even more amazing, the last kind of bartender community.
Yeah, so a little bit about SpeedRack. I think that this is, Lynette Moreau is my business partner in SpeedRack. She's right back there. We started SpeedRack 8 years ago, and it was kind of just this, we were just bartenders who wanted to create an event to raise a platform for women to stand on in a male-dominated industry. Even here at BCB, it's the only convention in the world where the line to the women's bathroom is shorter than the men's, and it's here in sporting events essentially, it's where that's the thing. We decided to create SpeedRack to create this platform for women to stand on, and then we also were like, well, we want to raise money for a charity event, and that charity we decided was going to be breast cancer. Lynette's mother-in-law is a survivor, and I have not immediately been affected in my immediate family, but if it's not your sister, mother, aunt, it's your best friend's mother, sister, aunt. And in we're starting our 8th season in November. And we've raised over $800,000 in the last 8 years for breast cancer, which is amazing. It's awesome. And now it's turned into the reason why I want to bring it up, or why Jacob asked me to be here, is that it really just started as an idea and an event to raise some money and create a platform for women to stand on. And then we cared so much about what we were creating that I feel like it was kind of contagious. And I feel like it's totally possible if you are like, oh, I am really adamant about, water usage, or I am really adamant about, humane society, and I don't want them to kill little puppies, or whatever it is. You can go and you can get someone else who believes this with you, and you can create an idea. And maybe it's just one event, and it's like, oh, that was kind of fun. Or maybe it's a bigger deal, like something like SpeedRack that keeps on going, and now has become a very integral part of our community. Or something like Pig and Punch, who they do stuff in the States where they get bartenders together and they go and paint schools, and then we all go to a big pig barbecue, and we all pay $25 to eat something, and then they raise $18,000 in a day. It's easy. It's easier than you think to make an impact on something that you want to do, because if you actually care, it's going to have legs and make an impact. And I want people to do more. Everyone's like, how did you do it? It's like, well, we had no idea this was going to be this successful. At the first event, we were looking around, we were like, oh my God, what have we done? And it's been fantastic. And now we have a whole network of women, and we've raised all this money, and we've made really good connections with different brands and different bartenders, male or female alike. And it's really been a leg up, which has been great.
I think SpeedRack is such an amazing example of hidden beneath any kind of cause or purpose-related marketing is a very simple idea. Take whatever you think is important and overlap it with whatever you think that you're good at, or whatever skills you kind of have, which seems like a pretty simple equation. When you put those two together, what do I care about? What needs to change in the world? What's important to me? And then what skills do I have? What am I good at? And when you overlap those two together, as you and Lynette did at SpeedRack, very quickly you get other people who come into your orbit who say, that issue is important to me too, I would like to help, or I have that set of skills as well, I would like to assist. And a tiny idea can become a very, very big one.
Exactly.
Sorry, we're about to get hustled, I think. So do we have any questions? Or perhaps I'll ask you a couple. How do you decide what charities to support when you're sitting at Leander and deciding which fund, what funds you want to raise?
Okay, so that is a very important question. I know we're running out of time, but there are websites you can go on to figure out how good charities are. There are some charities that might be like, oh, I really agree with this charity in this way, but in this way I don't. A good example is when we were raising money for SpeedRack, Susan G. Komen was this charity that everyone's like, oh, Susan G. Komen, you must love Susan G. Komen. And then this whole thing came out that they were very anti the women's right to choose of our reproductive health, which seemed kind of contradictory. So we were like, okay, we're not going to give money to Susan G. Komen. But you have to really do your research, and it can be tricky. But the way we decided with SpeedRack is really, do we agree with the ethics? Are they spending actually the money we're giving them on making a good thing happen? There have been situations in our very own industry where people have 501c3s that are not putting money in the right direction. But that's changing, which is good.
Cool. All right. Any questions from any of you about? I mean, I think that both of us feel that this is something which is going to become a really important trend and only become more important. And when you can put those three things together, you know, brands, bars, and bartenders working together, when you can find a kind of overlay between a cause that you care about and skills that you have to bring to effect to that cause, that can be hugely influential and important and literally change the world, you know, in very small ways, one drink at a time.
Yeah, I think if you have the platform, you have to use it.
Yep.
Bartenders are literally behind a bar. People are staring at you all night. So to have, depending on how aggressive and like, this is what I believe, or passive, there's an opportunity to make change.
Yep.
So you should do it.
For a couple of hours each evening, people will do what you say. And it's a very, very powerful thing. Cool. All right. Well, a huge thank you to Frankie and the team
Thank
here.
you.
A massive thank you to
Thank you.
Ivy. And thank you to every single one of you for coming. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.